Okay, it's time to start. Welcome back, everybody, to the afternoon session. Now we will. We have two people on the stage here, which is Tina Enghoff, photographer from Copenhagen, and we have also Christine Kern, Copenhagen, who will make an introduction to Tina's talk. They will talk on the title Bending the Frame in a Nordic Perspective. There you are.
Yes, thank you, Gunilla. I'm here again because I promised Tina to speak a little bit about why Fotografisk Center as a Kunsthalle is taking part in this exhibition that we're going to talk about. So we will do it like this. I will briefly introduce the concept of the exhibition and why we are in it. And then Tina will talk about some of the photographers. And then first and foremost, she will talk about her own work. We saw in the first presentation today an image of one of her books, Migrant Document, which was also a show at Fotografisk Center. And also yesterday, I showed one of her photos from the series 7. So this Bending the Frame, the title is taken from a book by the American professor Fred Ritchen from ICP. And we are going to curate the show together with him, in cooperation with him, so he will participate and put in his book, but also how the ideas has developed since the book was published, and other artists that he feels could kind of fit into the framework of the book. And Tina and I will contribute, especially both by discussing with him, but especially with the Nordic perspective. So we will kind of select some artists from the Nordic countries to also be put into this overall concept of bending the frame. And the exhibition is also going to be a Nordic cooperation. It will open in Fotografisk Center a year from now. And then afterwards it's going to Oslo, to the Preuss Museum. And then it's going to be here at Centrum for Fotografi in Stockholm, and then hopefully it will go to Helsinki, but I have talked to your colleague, Lina, Anna Karin, but we haven't really, got so long on the project, so maybe. And then I have a short presentation of the concept. In the beginning of the book, Fred Ritchen asks, what do we want with this media revolution? And I think this also connects very nicely to some of the discussions we had yesterday on activism and political photography. And it's in this book that forms the basis of the show, as I said. He is discussing, for instance, he asked what should be expected from professional photographers and journalists in documentary area, and the area of photography as automatically credible is over. So he's basically saying, well, we cannot trust photography anymore, so what should we do with it? And he argues in the book a little bit about, instead of talking about photography, maybe we should now start to talk about imagery or images. And there's a lot of forms which will also reflect in the exhibition. It will not only be photography, but also video, film, and other kind of lens-based art will be included. And the idea is to also put emphasis on works which kind of investigates the borders of documentary, or maybe you could say documentary is inspired by visual arts or vice versa, and how is these boundaries explored, and what is the difference, and how can it kind of contribute to each other. As you probably know, a lot of press photographers, they have very strict limits in terms of what they can use, for instance, in newspapers, and I remember a few years ago there was a debate about some images shown in New York Times because they were taken with an iPhone, and could you do that and then have them as press images in a newspaper and stuff like that. So the borders of journalism and documentary is pushed, and the borders of visual art is equally pushed, so that is also kind of intertwined that this exhibition is investigating. So we are looking at works that takes a stand and separate itself from the media, the stream of images in the media, you might say. And our idea is, Tina asked me to say something about our idea, to show photography that has something to say about the world we are living in, to point to future roles of photography, to bring together different forms or genres of photography and other lens-based media, and to make the audience think about the future of photography. And you might also say, of course, the content of the works, because many of the works that we are going to show, as Tina will talk about in a little bit, is works that that takes a personal stand, and many of them would be, I guess, labeled as political photography. So of course there is the content of the project, but also the way that these images are used to carry out the message, so to speak. So it's also about, in a way, what is photography and how can it be used to communicate.
Thank you, Christine. I think it was important. My voice is a little bit, I'll try to drink some hot coffee and make it as good as possible. But I think it was important that Christine was introducing this project, because we're doing it together. And of course we're doing it together with Fred Ritchien too. And we already talked to him, and I read the book, and I called him and I said, Fred, we're going to do an exhibition. And he said, well, I never thought about that, let's do it. So he was on, and he's of course being a part of choosing who's going to be in the exhibition. And already now he is, let me just see here, starting this. He's already pointing out photographers that is in the book, which he thinks is important in the kind of work that he's been writing about. So what I will do now is to go through some of the work that is in the book and that we are very much considering for the exhibition. And there will be people from Argentina, from Iran, from Holland, from other places too, the United States, from England. And then we will have the Nordic perspective as well. And I feel you said enough about Bending the Frame and enough about Fred Ritchien's thought about the book. But there's also a Swedish critics that I like very much that often says very wise things about photography. And I have a little quote here from him, because I read that a couple of years ago. And when I read that, I said to myself, well, one day we should do something with this. And then Bending the Frame come, and somehow those two things go very well together. So let me just read a little bit from a thing that he's been writing. It's Stefan Jonsson, the writer and Swedish critics, who wrote following. And this is translated. So I have translated it, so let's see how good it is. He writes, what do we want from the media? No, wait a second. Sorry, this is not the one. Okay, this is it. In this time when journalism is characterized by censorship on the border of standardization of form and content, the aim of art will be to inspire the debate about the future of society. How can it be that the task of art has increasingly come to mold the political, that is, the development of politics, at the same time as journalism to higher extent serve the politicians and mirror the powers and its rituals uncritically only to convey opinions? When the role of journalism is being reduced to recording, art becomes journalism in its original meaning, to have a standpoint and expose. I think that's very well said, and that's exactly what Bending the Frame is all about. I will shortly introduce some of the photographers in his project, and after that I will talk a little bit more about my own work and why this is interesting for me to be a part of, and how it kind of in a line of bending the frame fits into the content. So let's start here. First of all, I also would say that maybe I'm a little bit naive, but I'm still a romantic when it comes to changing the world in photography. I know it's said a lot of times, can you change the world with pictures and so and so? I think you can change the world maybe not only with pictures, but with speaks, with workshops, with getting things out there in the newspapers, working much more broadly than just with photography. And I still believe there is a chance out there to do something and change the world, maybe in a little content, but something. So the first project here that's in the book is James Rayner's The Last Suppers. Some of you might know some of this work here. This is pictures from inmates in a prison death sentence row, what they wished just before they were executed. And it's a really interesting project. The photographer here established actually the meals that these death row prisoners ate just before they were executed. So you can see here this picture. And I think this is really interesting. If we need a debate about death sentence, look at these pictures here. Some of these people that has been executed in the States are mentally ill. For example, this picture became a very famous picture in the States because the guy who said he only wanted to eat this little olive is that he said, well, when I'm dead, this olive will grow inside me and become a tree. I will become a tree. And so it was a lot of debate about how can you actually execute other people? Have you actually found out, are they mentally ill, and so on and on. So this is a very important project. It's photography, but it's also changing the opinion about death sentences in the States. This is another project, the Question Bridge, which is a very interesting project. It's video, 5 video channels, black males in the States that are discussing different subjects, and one of the subjects that they are discussing is, one is asking the question, how do you feel eating a banana in front of white people? And the other one are reflecting towards that. So it's also a project about the role of the black male in the States. It's also a project about racism, a lot of things. So this has become a very big, some of you might know the Question Bridge, and Fred is talking a lot about that in the book too. It's a very interesting project. So that's another one that we are definitely considering to have in the book. They were actually, the guys who made this were students of Fred Ritchen, who was teaching at New York University. So that's another project, and this one, the Kenyan Voices. It's a video project, also photographs that was made in Kenya about HIV, and there were videos showed in small remote areas, bringing people aware of what's happening with HIV, what is the possibility for people to actually do something with their own lives. And the text in the book is also talking about this project, that maybe 8 million people have seen this work here, and it's actually done a difference for people to actually understand that HIV is a deathly sickness and you have to do something about it. So in that sense, this is not just pictures, it's not just video, it's actually something coming out there and trying to change something, the opinion of people. The next one here is the French artist J.R., who made this project here, photographing women in this place here, and at the same time using the photographs as a roof for the houses, for the rain not to come in. And I think that's a great way of using photography. I like his work a lot. He's working out there. He's doing a lot of things outside, posters, pictures in the public space. So this is a project too that I think is damn interesting in using photography in another way. You can see here the pictures and how it's actually used as roofs afterwards. The other night sky is another project showing American satellites and the secret satellites that the CIA in the States are using. And these are pictures taken from amateurs, kind of people who are sitting at home trying to find out where are these satellites and what are they doing. It's a long talk about this project. I'm not going to talk so much about it, but it's a really interesting subject about how is what is happening out there and how is the United States using their spy satellites and so on. So photography can be used in many different places. The guy who made this is not a photographer. He's working in a totally another field, but he's still using photography, showing something about how the states are operating and the CIA. This project here is an Argentina photographer who's putting these pictures together. It's an old picture from, what does it say here? It's from 1975 and 2006, and there's one person missing. And this was, you know, at that time in Argentina, a lot of people disappeared. A lot of people disappeared and were never seen again. Nobody knows what happened to them. So this is a project actually still putting pressure on the government to find out what happened to these thousands and thousands of people disappearing in Argentina. So he's taking old photographs, and I think it's a very nice way of actually putting pressure on the people, saying this is not over, there's still something out there to be found out. And you see the people who was in the picture, and now the other ones, they're just gone. We don't know what happened to them. And I think it's interesting to see how history of photography, old pictures and new pictures can work together. Here again, photographed in the same spot, but the one guy is gone. And here they're both gone. I mean, it's on this beach here, and the beach today, they're both gone, and nobody knows what happened to them. Also, I think a very interesting project. And Susan Marcella's project, Reframing History, which I really also like, how she went back to Nicaragua and kind of showing people in the villages their history, what happened, putting the pictures up in the public space, which I think is a very interesting way of working, and having discussion about time and history, and actually involving people in the city, in the small villages, putting up the pictures. That's something that I, in the late couple of years here, has been working a lot with too, involving people more directly, not just out there, but really making them actually do work themselves. And here again, one of Susan Marcella's work here. And these are actually her photographs that she took in Nicaragua at when the Sandinistas and this whole revolution happened. And last year, I just wanted to say, Ken Clich, most of you know that I live together with Kent, and his new project is also, because he's going to be in the exhibition, is very obvious to have in the Bending the Frame. He's been working many years in Gaza, and this is his third book, Black Friday, who's just came out today, by the way. I haven't seen it, but I just heard that he got it from Kera, the German publisher. And the book is about one day in Gaza, the 1st of August, where the Israeli army went into an area, and actually there was one soldier who disappeared in a tunnel, and they went in and they killed 128 civilians in Gaza just to get the soldier out. The thing was that he was killed too, and Amnesty is taking this project to the Human Rights Court now, because you cannot kill 128 women, children, you know, young boys, just to get one soldier out. But somehow he had a knowledge that they didn't want to, that the the Palestinian people got. So Kent has been working together with Forensic Architecture. He's been working together with Amnesty, And I think personally it's a very interesting way of working, that you work with organizations, you work with people who has another entrance to this kind of area. So this is the area before they bombed it. Here is also how they bombed around in the Gaza Strip during those days. It was just 1 year ago. And these pictures are actually in the book. And here's the tunnel, how it looked after it was bombed. This picture and several other pictures are in the book. And these are places where people were killed. Again, places where people were killed. It's very much like a document, exactly how many people were killed, where they were killed, in which order they were killed. And Amnesty has like a whole 10 minutes, every 10 minutes something changes. And he has the report in the book too. And I think that's really interesting to have that totally like a document, what is happening here. It's 1 day. And then the book is consisting of the people who was killed. Simply the names, the age, and the black dots are people where they didn't have any pictures. So he went down there with fact finders and actually found out who was killed, what time they were killed, in which order they were killed. And he got a lot of pictures that Amnesty is using today in the trial that they are going to have now. So in that sense, it's actually changing something. It's doing something for the people down there. So there's a lot of pages in the book just with these squares here and the names of the people killed. And when you actually see the faces, you understand this is young people, it's babies, it's women. It's not just soldiers, it's not just nobody. And they don't have a big tradition of photographs in Gaza, for example. So Ken got the photographs that he could get, and the other ones were just black dots here. So this is part of the book, and this was just a little introduction to Bending the Frame. And the idea now is to get Scandinavian photographers into it, and at the same time having talks and workshops coming along with the exhibition. Because I think when you work with these kind of subjects, it's very important also to talk about it and actually have some good discussions like we have had here the last 2 days. So that's a little bit of the idea. I want to go back in time now and talk a little bit about my own work, why I'm interested in Bending the Frame, why I can see myself being a part of the project. And I will start out with a project called 7 Years. And it's kind of interesting because I was working with nature. I was working with, you know, we have been talking a lot about nature photography today, during these 2 days here. And my idea was to use nature because nature is such a spirit of the Nordic art world, but I will not put people into it that are Danish or Norwegian or whatever. I wanted to put women into the pictures that are women from other countries, from other ethnic backgrounds that are coming to Denmark, marrying a Danish husband, or an ethnic, it could be a guy from Turkey who has a Danish citizenship. And what is happening in Denmark is that you come to Denmark, you marry a Danish man, and you have to stay married for 7 years to be able to divorce. Even though the man is beating you, even though you are ending up in a woman's, you know, one of these shelters, you have to learn Danish, you have to be married to this man, and it's really a question of how much can you stand? I think Christine said yesterday, maybe we did change a little bit. I mean, the idea was to change the rules in Denmark. I worked together with a Palestinian woman who was an activist, and we really did try a lot of things during this project here. We made talks, we involved people, a lot of organizations, and first of all, we involved these women to actually tell their stories about what has happened to them. So I will just go through the pictures here, and as you see, no faces, because all these women are living in a very dangerous situation. They are stuck in a refugee camp in Denmark, or they're stuck in a shelter for women. because their husbands often want to kill them, or some really, really bad things. And I must say, I was really shocked when I heard the stories here. So I couldn't photograph them in the environment where they were because it was too dangerous for the husband to find them. So I did choose the Danish nature. I'm not a nature photographer at all, but I found out that this was the right place to do them. You could not recognize where are these women, and I promised them not that they could not be recognized. So that was the idea, to actually go back in history and use the Danish nature as a background. So I will just go through pictures here. I photographed the women as if they were nothing. One of the critics wrote an article in Copenhagen about the work, and she called it "I am nothing." And I think that was a very good headline, because these women felt that they were absolutely nothing. And that's also the way that I photographed them, as non-existing persons in the Danish society. So I'm just going through here. All these women, there was a text to every single picture describing the women's situation. When did she come to Denmark, and when did she leave Denmark? Because 90% of all these women have left Denmark again, sent back to their countries, and we don't know. One we have really tried to track down and follow, and the other one are just gone. So it was very hard to see, what's going to happen to them. And I think this has a lot to do with our Nordic tradition, Normally we will take people in, normally we will do something, but in this case, everybody was like, we cannot do anything, they are going to be sent back because they cannot stay with this violent husband. So here are pictures from the exhibition. Just going through it pretty quickly here. And as you can see, normally they are here, but somehow they're not here anyway. They're just lying here in the middle of the nature, like a shot animal or something like that. It took a lot of energy to actually make these women being a part of this project, but for them it was also extremely important that somebody wanted to listen to them, And I think at least 5 years is a little bit. In Sweden it's 2 years only. I had a big exhibition at Kulturhuset, and we had a lot of talks, and people got very involved. And in Sweden it's only 2 years. In Denmark it's still 5 years to stay with a violent husband. I made a video at the same time, a 4-channel video that was in a very big room. And some of the women, they were talking. It was like I made a labyrinth of voices going in and out of each other in slow motion. Some were going like normal pace, some in slow motion. And they were all talking about, the feeling of being trapped. That was exactly how they felt. They felt trapped in this society. And some of these women, as you see, could be recognized, but we only used the women that said it was okay, because in every single step you do in a project like this has to be totally, okay for them to be a part of. And the video installation looked like this, and you could see, it changes. There was like 10 different languages going over through each other, and then you have English subtitles. Like the one is saying there, I didn't know where to go. Things like this. After the project, what happened was that we showed it outside in the public space with sound, because I think very often you don't get the right people in the museum. And if you work in a public space, you can get much more out and reach people who would never put their foot in a gallery or in a museum. So that was also an interesting way of working with this project, much more out there, projecting. I remember there was one man who wanted to, he came by and we had the voices and everything, and the video was over here, and he wanted to tear everything down, you know. He got so angry, and we thought, okay, this is good, you know, because, I mean, he's confronted with this if he wants or not. So in that sense, I think to work in the public space can be really interesting. We did another thing, which I kind of thought was a part of this project. This guy who's walking in front here was one of the violent husbands, and he got to court. Actually, it came to court. The story came to court that he was beating up the woman that he had taken to Denmark. So we decided that we will put up a team of photographers who were not photographers to put a pressure on him, because they did not like, this is the father, and that the press was on, you know. We had an article in one of the newspapers, but like lining up with 5, 6 photographers, it looks like this was a very big story. And we did put a pressure on this man, you know. He was a totally psychopath, as really, and the woman that he was married was an intelligent, wonderful Palestinian woman, Pakistan woman. And I think things like this could be a part of a photographic project. We did put pressure on him. We threatened him that we will actually put the pictures out in a newspaper. Usma, that I worked with, was a Pakistan woman in newspaper and telling about his violent, how he treated the woman. So in that sense, I think the activism part came out of this project too. And I love the way these photographers are all standing there looking like they really are photographers, you know, taking picture of this guy. There's only one real photographer here. So that was a project that actually did something. We did something. We took the big talks. A lot of people came, and I think in many ways it felt good to do this project afterwards too. And some projects are better to actually change things than others, I think. Migrant Documents is another project that I did afterwards. And the project where this was, today everybody's talking about the refugees, everybody's talking about the migrants. But this is a project that at that time, it wasn't that big in Copenhagen. It was still coming more and more migrants. You see them on the street. And there was a big group of African migrants coming from outside the common market. And what I wanted to do with this project is actually put another twist on it, because when you are illegal migrant and when are you a tourist? I think that's an interesting thing. You can come to a country as a migrant and stay there for 3 months, and if you get a job inside, if you are from inside the EU, the common market, you can stay. If you cannot have a job, you have to be out. The Africans that came often had a working permit in Italy, so they could actually come and stay in Copenhagen for 3 months trying to get a job. Very few succeeded. But still, when are you a tourist and when are you a migrant, illegal migrant on the streets of Copenhagen? So I put kind of focus on things that a tourist have, the luggage, for example. This is the luggage from the African migrants, putting their luggage up in the trees, as you see here, in a park. The way to keep the luggage, very different from a tourist, for example. This is a park where a lot of the migrants slept in the nighttime. There was only one place in Copenhagen at that time where they could sleep. There was a private organization that took them in, and there were only like 20 sleeping places, and everybody else has to sleep out, even in the winter time. What I also did is that I made a video installation for the exhibition. I put up a surveillance camera in a window over this park here, and this is screen dumps from the video where you see how the park changes in the nighttime. You have migrants sleeping there. In the daytime, you have children going to school. So I sat there from the evening until the morning with this surveillance camera, hoping that the police didn't look up, because you had a lot of police. You're not allowed to do this, but I did it anyway and made the video installation here. Here you see in the morning, actually started snowing in the nighttime, and the children started to go to school. And in the nighttime, you have, you can see the migrant is sleeping out there. It was like ice cold. It was in January. You can see on the film how he's moving around and stuff. So this was also part of how do you actually sleep when you come to another country. So this is just to show a little bit about the video installation here. And the next thing I did was, now we already once in these 2 days talking about the Little Mermaid. I went down to the Little Mermaid, the most touristic place in Copenhagen, and I photographed people from the back. Can you see if this is a tourist or a migrant, a legal migrant? You cannot see. And I wanted them just to stand there and kind of just look. You don't know what they're looking at, but they're looking at something. So there was a series too with the people, tourists at the Little Mermaid. This is just a part of it. I'll show you here. And another series is also the sleeping situation for these migrants are really extreme. This is the place that I talked about, that they had 20 places to sleep. Some could sleep on bed, and others could sleep on these pads lying on the floor. And what I did is I went there like many days in a row, and every day I just photographed the shelves where they put back the blankets, and a little bit how it changed all the time. Every day it looked differently. How they put it back on the shelves. This is not a 3-star hotel, it's the shelter. And I made an installation with all the pictures at the end here. Slightly changing, but still the same 4, and the same blankets and pads. And that's the room where the things are lying, and they come in there, it's totally bare, and you take out a blanket and you just sleep here. And I tell you, in the evening, there are so many people waiting out there to be able to sleep in this place here, and a lot of them have to sleep out in the park. So one of the projects in this migrant documents, everything is a document in itself, was called The Unknown is Not a Memory. And what I did here, I made postcards. I didn't make the postcards. I asked 7 different African migrants to act as a tourist in Copenhagen. I gave them cameras and I said, now you're not an illegal migrant anymore, you're a tourist. And they loved it actually. It was very, very nice to see how engaged they got in this. And they got the camera, every single one came back with a camera, and they took pictures of what they see, because one thing is, what do I see, but what do they see? And this is what they saw, and I find these pictures very interesting. These 3 famous posts are, things in Copenhagen, one of the most touristic things. This is what they saw. This is what I said to them, now you go out and you take back memories. Will you back to Africa? I love this picture. It's a good scene. And they photographed statues and things that they saw that they thought was wonderful. And this is wonderful too, because somehow it's something that they recognize from where they come. They went to Christiania and so on. So these are all postcards, the famous statue in Copenhagen. And one of the guys there, which was amazing, every single picture he came back with was a green picture. He just photographed trees, everything was green. And I made a picture out of that at the exhibition. I'm just showing you. This is his pictures, one guy from Mali. This is paradise for him, that's what he sees. Of course it is. I mean, I think if anybody has been to Mali, of course it's paradise. So these are all, they made a lot of pictures, and finally very touristy pictures, some of them too. This is also a great picture, I think. And this one, and at the end here. at the exhibition, the postcards were put out on a table for people to take and actually send them, because the postcards said it's taken by an illegal migrant in, actually we don't call them illegal because we call them undocumented. I think that's a better word to use. And everybody could take postcards for free and send it from them. So in that sense, I had an idea in the beginning that we should sell the postcards and give the money to them, you know, and all those kind of things. But I found out that these people are moving around all the time. I could not, I mean, most of them were gone after 1 month, 2 months. They did not like to be in Copenhagen. They found it extremely racistic, and most of them wanted to go back to Spain and Italy again. So I kind of lost contact with all of them. And what I did also, actually, the exhibition Migrant Documents were held at Tegen 2 in Stockholm here, Dror Feiler, Gunilla Skjolds Feiler's gallery that Ken and I work very closely together with often. And what we did there is that we collected a lot of clothes. We were organized together with the undocumented migrant organization. They're much more organized in Sweden. And a lot of people came with winter clothes. So you had this room with the video, and it started growing more and more and more and more with clothes and plastic bags. So in that sense, it was great that something like this happened. Another project is also in Migrant Document is that I went down to the place where people can come if they're sick and you know, get medical help for undocumented migrants. And what I wanted to show there is that if you take a blood sample of somebody like you and me or an undocumented migrant, you cannot see the difference. So somehow it's like a history of family of man, that we are all equal in somehow, you know. So every time, every of these blood tests are from different migrants. And I could have taken the same one and turned it around, but that's not the way to do it. Every single one is a new one. They called me and say, now we have a blood test here. These are bloods full of all kinds of sicknesses, AIDS, whatever you want. And the only place they could go was to these doctors that were working for free and helping them, because they were not allowed to be part of the official system in Denmark. Only if you're dying on the street, they will take you in. So I went down here and made, like for the exhibition, a lot of these pictures too. Different blood from every single of these migrants. So it's all kind of different takes on the same subject. Again, I mean, they wrote the name here, and it was very important that we could not see the names on these people here. That's another thing that is important, is when you work with something like this, I think personally, that if you promise them that they will not be photographed, if they don't want to be photographed, that's what you do. And they don't want to be photographed, of course not, because they're living here undocumented. They do not want to stand and say, this is my face, this is how I look. So I wanted to do it another way. Another thing that I did too was to do like a sound track with interviews with these African migrants. I was concentrating on the African migrants. And I think that's very interesting. It's extremely interesting to hear what they're saying. And I still remember one of them saying on this, track here, putting a question out to us, saying, what do you think I would do when I see white men in Africa? Should I greet him, or what should I do? I often think about the way that he was treated in Europe, and how actually white people expect to be treated well in Africa. So I think they were smart guys. They put out questions, and they were really, I think that track was very important for the whole exhibition. The exhibition was held at Fotografisk Center with Christine Kern as the curator. Oh, this is from, it's coming here. This is from Tegen 2, just starting in the beginning, people putting in close for the winter time. Another project, which is in line of this project, is a project that I don't think actually became such a big success, because it was difficult. But I had an idea, and sometimes you think that the idea will be a success, and I think in many ways it failed. And I think it failed because if you want to take people who normally go to museums or galleries out to a really obscure area in Copenhagen to see an exhibition, it's not always what they want to do. You know, you want to try and make them come out, but it didn't really succeed 100%, I would say. The thing was that I got this idea to do a street in Copenhagen. You can see here from the main central station out to a homeless place where homeless people were living. A road that they go every day. It's a really, at that time, it was a really bad area. It was very dark, nothing out there. And a guy that I know that works with homeless people, he said to me, you know, Tina, one day I decided to feel how is it to be homeless. And I started walking a rainy November night out to this place called the Heaven Express. That's what it's called. And I walked there, and I came out there, and there was a note on the door saying, all occupied. Then you're standing out there in absolutely nothing. Right now, they're building new apartments. It's changing in a very, very short time. This area has changed a lot. And when I heard that, I said, okay, this could be a damn interesting project to do. I will actually go this road every day for 1 year. And pretty crazy idea, but at the same time, I found out that I could do it in a little bit different way. The days that I was not in Copenhagen, I made other people walk the road here and pick up a subject, something that they found on the street, and I photographed that. So I involved the Danish Architecture Center in this project, and it became really big. We called it all Get Lost. Kent was involved. A lot of artists were involved, and we made all kinds of things in the city. And maybe that's where the mistake came in, because it became too artsy, too, you know, a lot of things. And I don't really think a lot of people went the way that I wanted it to go. We made, you know, badges that people could take on the street, and all kinds of activism around the exhibition. And the book was a little book with pictures from every single day. Like you can see here, objects from every day. And here are some of the pictures, a little bit bigger. And here was the idea to put the pictures back into the walk. So the pictures actually became a part of actually walking this street here. So you can see a little bit how the sizes are. They were enormous, and to do an exhibition outside in the public space is a hell of a lot of work. I think people who have tried it here, it sounds pretty easy, but it is a lot of work to make it happen. And in that sense, it was great the Danish Architecture Center went in and helped with all the releases of putting out the pictures and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes today I actually meet people who said, I walked that street when you had your pictures there, but I felt that it could have been more successful, more people could have gone and being a part of this project here. But this is a little bit how it looked. And in the end here, I will just talk a little bit about what I'm working on right now. I'm working on a project called 100 Places of Crime, which is actually places in whole Denmark where some hate crimes had happened. And it's been a hell of a lot of work because I had to contact the police to get these places here. And some of the police areas, they do not want to work together with me at all, and some will. So it's a challenge, I would say. But now I'm half through it after a long time, and the idea is that there will be 100 pictures. Every picture will have a file number, the way that the police file these hate crimes, and they could be small hate crimes all the way down to, you know, people coming up to a guy on the street and say, you look like a monkey, or, you know, something like this. Every single hate crime has to be told to the police. It's really important. And, you know, if people shout after people on the street, it has to be reported. So that's one of the things that there will be a short text from the journals, from the police, and a picture, and it will be a small project with 100 pictures. And in the midst of all this, the big shooting in Copenhagen happened at Krudttønden. You remember 2 people were killed, and that made this project much more difficult for me, because somehow the police didn't want to be a part of it anymore, and things got much more too serious. But at the other hand, I feel that all the small hate crimes are actually pointing of much bigger hate crimes all the time. So every single picture is a file in the police in Jutland, in Fyn, in Sjælland, and I'm pretty much close to having all the places. Pretty much, I still have some to go. Here I'm photographing with an old 6x7 camera, big, with a black cloth, you know, carrying it around. And actually the idea is to kind of having the same visual as pictures from Germany 1936, 38, 40, just before Second World War. So it's the same technique. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but I'm walking with this camera, bicycling with it, and stuff like that. So these are all places where hate crimes has appeared, stations in the city of Copenhagen, and at a job center here. So this is one project that I'm working on now, and the next project that I'm also working on is a project that came out after the shooting in Copenhagen. The guy who actually did it was a young guy with another ethnic background, and he just came out of the prison. When he did it, he has been sitting in isolation in this prison that I actually got access to, and there's like 7 isolation rooms, and every single one of them, when there's been a guy sitting in there, the police put a little note outside like this, saying what has happened inside the room. I think the text here is, you can see a little bit more here, it's just saying that what has he done? He's been burning the ceiling, he's been, you know, scratching the wall, and so on and so on. So I have access now to photograph every time they change the isolation, and it will become a little book just called Isolation, and this is the place where he was sitting just before he made the crime. I've been in this isolation cell, and it's a hell of a terrible place, I can tell you. So that's another project, and just at the end here, am I going over time?
A little bit.
Okay, I will be quickly. I'm working also very much directly with young people with Nikolaj Art Hall in Copenhagen for the last 3 years, doing video installations with young guys with other ethnic backgrounds. And I've done 3 video installations showed at the video festivals there. Them confronting people on the street, they're filming, they're photographing, and this is just a little bit at the end here. So, and I'm doing the same work in Greenland in small remote areas, and I think that's a directly way to use photography in an interesting place to involve people directly to make their own pictures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And thank you for your very interesting talk about your important and urgent project. So now we have some time for questions. Hanna.
Thank you. It was really interesting. How do you fund your projects? How do you get money for them?
I think, is this the one? Yeah. Well, that's a whole other ball game. Well, one of the things that I do, of course, you actually apply for fund. Some of them, you know, but you never know. I mean, you start a project, you never know what way it's going. you have to cross your fingers and close your eyes and hope for the best, you know. And sometimes it happens that I will be able to fund them. Sometimes once I printed a book and I didn't know if I could pay for it. And just like 2 days before the bill was running out, I got a big grant. So I have to say, you know, I mean, Jens has been talking about catalog and taking a risk. I think we photographers are taking a risk every single day, you know, doing works. And but it's worth it.
Okay, thank you. Jenny?
There is shouldn't you be in Malmö right now on the activist
Oh yes,
festival?
I am next weekend.
You are, yeah.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Anna Telgren?
Yes, since this is a seminar on Nordic photography, so I wonder the title, Bending the Frame in a Nordic Perspective. What is the Nordic, should you say now, the Nordic approach in bending the frame? Is that you're inviting Nordic photographers also in the project, or is it something else?
Well, I think, you know, what I've been showing now, every single work here is done in Denmark. And I think that's very much the Nordic perspective, that actually we do have things. I remember one time I heard, it really got me really angry. I heard a curator on the radio in Denmark saying, we do not need political art in Denmark because we have such a great society. Of course we need it. I mean, come on. I mean, we have so many problems, you know. And so I think that is the Nordic perspective. The Nordic perspective is that we can do art which is important in Denmark, in Sweden, in Norway. And we will have Nordic photographers in the project at the same time.
Yeah, I can also add, the thing is, it's a cooperation between institutions in the whole of the Nordic countries. That's one thing, and the other thing is that we are kind of taking the theme of Fredriksen's book and unfolded it into a Nordic context and include Nordic photographers in the show.
Yeah, from what I've understood about our discussion for having the show here is that each place where it will be shown, Swedish photographer local will add to it. So it will look different in each place.
Yeah.
Picking up a flavor of what's happening at the actual place where it will be shown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also to add a little bit is that I think Nordic photography is a lot human rights involvement, not only, I mean, I love beautiful pictures. I mean, nothing at all wrong with that, not at all. But I also think that we have another side to it, that we actually have a lot of people who is involved in all kinds of political work, and we have a society that actually give us possibilities to work in these directions and point out what is wrong, what is right, what can we do with photography, how can we change something, you know. And I think that is very much the Nordic spirit.
Jenny?
Do you see any differences between the Nordic countries that you have? I mean, you have is there a stronger activist movement in Denmark than, for example, in Sweden? In according to you,
I actually find it more active in Sweden. I think Sweden has a lot, but maybe I'm very much. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm very much involved with the Tekken 2 and Dror Feiler and Gunilla Skjoldfeil. It's very good friends of ours, and they do a lot of activism work. Now look at Malmö, what they are doing, and I think a lot of things are happening. There are also things happening in Copenhagen, of course, but directly I can point out things happening in Sweden right now, which is great. And I think I will take my words back again. Things are definitely also happening in Copenhagen. I know less about Finland and Norway, I have to admit. But I think it's happening out there, and we are a lot of people who is involved in photography because we love pictures, we love photography, but we also are political active.
And last comment from me then. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned Stefan Jonsson's work on or writing on the situation where the current society situation with the image world is so difficult for people to grasp, so that journalism has a problem in a way. and where the importance of art to really put things into context and use imagery in a way that can actually be perceived and processed.
Exactly.
So, and I understand this is a crucial thing in the project with Fred with the show.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, very often, a lot of people are only reading Metro Express these days. You know, very short things, not really. I mean, the newspapers are going really shitty, and I think a lot of artists have a place now to actually show some of these things that before was investigative journalism in another way. And I find that really interesting.
Good. We're really short of time, so this is a really short one then, John.
If you're in the journal, I'll have to say something. Hello, I'm John Kimmick, and I teach in the photojournalism program up in Sundsvall. But to say that the role that art has taken the role of journalism, because journalism is scrappy, that is actually quite correct. But what I wanted to add is, because of the role of this multi-journalism, where people are not doing everything, the photographers who have been very much involved in journalism are now, you might want to say, forced to take the route of art and take their work into exhibitions, into books also. So it's a kind of bringing together, because of the media failing its job, of the two practitioners on both sides, maybe coming to more common language.
Yep.
Right. Well, thank you.
Good point. Okay, thank you so much, Tina. Yeah. And now we will have the artist talk with Kirstine and the artists. So come on up. And you are not going to use the projector or anything, so we just revealed Johan's work behind the screen there. And perhaps I let you introduce the artist and everything, so there you are.
Thank you. My name is Kirstine Sias Højmose, and I curated this show for Fotografisk Center a year ago. Is it loud enough? It's called, can you hear me? We'll try the other one. I curated this show a year ago for Fotografisk Center. We opened it in Copenhagen, and it's called Inner and Outer Landscapes. We opened it in Copenhagen almost a year ago, and then it traveled to Bergen in Norway and to Oulu in Finland, where Alla and Julia and the rest of the group are from. And now it's in Stockholm, its final stop on this tour. And these 5 artists have done all these wonderful works. And it's from the right, it's Ditte Knus Tønnesen from Denmark, and Johan Bergström from Sweden, and Ingvar Høgni Ragnarsson from Iceland, and Tonje Bø Birkeland from Norway, and Annie Lippala from Finland. And it's nice that we are all here today, because during this exhibition tour, there's always been someone missing. So now we're finally together and can discuss what has been going on. And I made a plan for us to talk about this exhibition, but also like what came out of it, and what have you learned from it? How did you develop as artists, and so on. But we talked about yesterday that it's quite difficult to say already now what came out of it, even though it's been a year. What happened, what came out of it, what did we learn? So instead, I'm just gonna shortly talk about the project, what was the idea, and then I'm gonna ask the artists to present themselves just shortly, and maybe tell a bit about these projects, actually, because we haven't done the regular artist talk that we have done in the other places. So I'm just gonna ask you to shortly present your works, and then we're gonna have I think an open discussion. I have a few issues that we could address, because I think also this seminar is about the artistic point of view. We've been discussing fundraising and practical stuff at the other seminars, so to have more the artistic point of view, which is a bit abstract and maybe a bit tricky, but let's try. I just want to say that the idea of this exhibition grew out of two of the artists. I knew their works, and I would like to do something with them. And then I would like to do something with young Nordic artists, because I somehow like getting to know new artists and helping them in their career as well, and presenting some new artists that are maybe not that far ahead in their career. So that was like a bit of the strategy. And then I had these two artists, and I was looking at what do they have in common, can I figure out a theme in this perspective? And then there was something about the landscape that is, of course, going on in many places and has been going on for many years. But I thought there's something about the landscape today, and why do we bring back the landscape? For many years it has been like a cliche, and we didn't want to look at the landscape anymore, and what can we do about it? Can we even look at the landscape in new ways? So I was thinking, okay, the landscape is coming back, and it's still a very important issue. And then I found some more artists that could fit in a way that would discuss the landscape in different ways. It has been quite important to not like just having 5 artists working more or less in the similar way, but to have different views on the landscape. And the idea was also inspired by the way we use nature today. Many of us living in modern cities, we go to nature to find peace or rest or do gardening work in order to like feel less stressed at work and stuff like that, which I think is really interesting, because what is nature, and what did nature and landscape, not necessarily the same thing? What did it mean earlier, back in the days, and what does it mean today, not just in the art world? So my idea was to present different kinds of landscape, not just the nature landscape, also the urban landscape, because the landscape is like a term more than like a thing. It's not necessarily just the physical landscape outside of our house. It can also be the mental landscape, which is the idea of the inner-outer landscape title. We talk about my mental landscape, or my inner landscape is like full of emotion, and I'm sad, and now I'm happy. And so landscape is so many things, and I think it's interesting to look at that also like in a poetic, philosophical, sociological way, just shortly, because we could talk about this for like an hour, I guess. So that's why I chose this topic. And then, of course, the rest has to do with the works, what they tell you and how you react to them in the landscape. And then I just, to wrap this idea up, was also to work with, when I bring 5 Nordic artists together and have an exhibition touring the Nordic countries. Of course, it could tour the rest of the world, who knows? It doesn't have to be just the Nordic countries. But it was also, an idea was also to make exchanges. It's part of this project called Nordic Exchange, because I think a lot of times we make projects and artworks, and we have a lot of great discussions like at this seminar, and then when we're done discussing it, that's just often it. The thing about gathering knowledge and bringing it further out is often a problem, I think. So we made this blog called Nordic Exchange. Christine gave you the link yesterday. And the idea was to have an online platform for discussion and knowledge exchange, and didn't have to be in a certain way. It could be an artist presenting their work, or it could be a curator having some discussions. I've made some like report from these seminars we've been going to, just listing what did we discuss and what is it to work in a cross-Nordic project, and about fundraising. It could be everything, and having it edited by different people, and everybody can contribute. So if you have a great thing to suggest or present, just do it. Just contact Fotografisk Center. Everybody can contribute to this blog. It's in English to make it easy and available for everyone. So that was an experiment and a way to broadening it, so it's not only and necessarily a physical exhibition. Yeah, that was more or less it. But I will hand over the microphone and maybe just shortly present your project. Of course it's short, but then we can have a discussion about how it's been working like this. And I also want to ask you how it feels to be part of a Nordic project. Does it even make sense? And is it important? Or is it just the fun of having a group exhibition, touring, meeting new people, and getting to know each other, and maybe getting some new network contacts? So we can discuss that afterwards. Annie, would you start?
Hello. My name is Anni Leppälä. I'm from Finland, living in Helsinki, and you can see my works are on this wall here. And it's been a little bit different collection of images in each of these exhibitions we've been touring. And it's been interesting, like collecting works for this theme of landscape and also for the Nordic view, because it's not my main theme in any way. It's just like it can be a surrounding, it can be a undertone on the works. So I'm mainly working like this ongoing process. I'm not working with separate series or projects. I'm more like adding pieces to the entity of the works I've been working on now for over 10 years. So you can see one collection here, and it's always a little bit different depending on the space. And what I find really fascinating in photograph is the way that they have a very strong relation to the concrete visible world or the surface of it, but still the photograph really changes the subject. And I think I'm trying to trace these kind of experiences or recognizing memories or feelings or like in connection with the works. And what is important in my works is how the works relate to each other, how the images connect to each other. So that's something that I'm searching for, that I'm adding new pieces to in my work.
Hello, I'm Tonje Bø Birkeland from Norway, and I'm both educated and kind of based in Bergen at the moment. I've been working with the characters, these female explorers, since 2008. And the first character, Alina, I always have to start with explaining her, because she was very much about, she was kind of very much inspired by the Norwegian, and like how we kind of built or rebuilt our confidence as an independent state around 1900 with our polar explorers, and how we tend to call them scientists, but we really don't have a clue what they did up far north in Spitsbergen and attempting to go to the North Pole and so on. Then I decided I wanted to challenge myself and do a character going to Mongolia for my second project, Tuva Tengel. Born in 1901, working with a kind of journalist approach, very much inspired by my own great-grandmother, who was a journalist, also born in 1901. And then I got very sick in Mongolia. And then I ended up doing this very sublime and romantic landscape project, because for me, nature and landscape are two very different things. And basically, when I created Luelle Magdalene Lumiere, I was based in New York, and I was far too sick to go to any nature. I had this bacteria that I contracted I got the bacteria, got this infection in Mongolia in 2011. It's something that about 10% at least of the Mongolian population suffer from, but it took, no one's ever had it in the Nordic countries before. Then I started doing this, and now I'm a bit more back to where I started with character number 1, because number 4, Anna Aurora, she traveled to East Greenland on a sailing boat, and I decided to do it more real than what I've done before. So I was also traveling along the east coast of Greenland in a sailing boat. I could only finance 3 weeks of it. I would have loved to do 3 months or something, but and the texts are very different, like very different from, and sometimes even actually I wouldn't say defending, but they are pinpointing things that you won't necessarily read within the photographs. So I would recommend all of you to kind of dig into, and that's actually for about all of us, like dig into the material about us on the Nordic Exchange and read our text on our own websites. And Annie's book says something about the series. So, and there, I think. And then I would love questions later on. Thank you.
My name is Ingvar Högni Ragnarsson. come from Iceland and based in Reykjavik. I studied in Iceland and in Holland, in Den Haag. And here in this group exhibition of ours, and I'm exhibiting the series Waiting, which is hanging here. And well, like my work maybe in general is, I work on the border of documentary, fine art, kind of a blurry line there between, but it's always starts socially oriented something. And most of the time I work long term in my project, so it always changes and developed during this time. And for me, I kind of need this long term to get a constructed whole of a project in some sense. But to tell you a little bit about this project was that I was living in Reykjavik at this time, and it started around 2004, and it goes on for 8 years. That's also a blurry line because I find it very hard to stop with this project because I always see something new. But I saw in the 2004 that you have the economic boom in Iceland, and I started asking myself a lot of questions about this, how the whole scenario of what was taking place inside the city, because I saw something else compared to what was portrayed out in the media and the society, and started to document the decay and of the structures and the urban landscapes I saw. And when I had my project finalized, sort of in my mind, in 2008, the society collapses. And for me, I'm stating the obvious at the time, and it's getting media attention, of course. But I decided to continue with the project as long as I did before the recession, and that's why I can revisit some locations and have the before and after effect of a dramatic change in effect in the society. And this is sort of, for them, maybe it's like listening to a broken record, because we're always saying the same thing again and again, and, in these travels. But this is like, this is maybe the short version of what was, for me, what was taking place in our society at the time. And also the title Waiting came because of when such a dramatic change happened in the society and everything collapsed. Of course, a lot of questions came up in people's minds, and everyone was crisscrossing and pointing towards each other, and who was to blame, and who was going to fix this problem which we are facing. So, but sort of no one took responsibility, and nobody wanted to do something or to take the blame for it. So you had this kind of a status quo feeling getting through the whole society, and this whole feeling of waiting and anticipation of what's going to happen and take place. So that was kind of what's there. But and this is something about the other. And then of course I have some other projects which I'm working on. But feel free to ask any questions about it, or if you want to know more. So, but this is about the Waiting project.
Hello, my name is Johan Bergström, and I live and work here in Stockholm. And in most of my works, I deal with the landscape in some sense, but most often the landscape is more of a kind of scene whereupon I project ideas or questions. And in this exhibition, I'm showing this work, Pagan Postcards. And the starting point for this project was an interest in the Norwegian black metal scene. It's a kind of obscure music genre that developed in Norway in the early 90s and became famous worldwide because of their burning of churches and murders within the scene. So it's a kind of satanic and very misanthropic ideology. But my interest was beside this satanic views. They express a really romantic, nature romantic view that is expressed both in introduced and in their lyrics. So I wanted to apply excerpts of these lyrics up on the Norwegian landscape that they are singing about. And I found many similarities within the black metal to like the romanticism during the 19th century, in kind of how they use nature as a counter image to modern society, like nature as a critique and nature as a symbol of an idealized past. So I try to make the images in a romantic style, and yeah, so it's kind of two images of on the same subject that kind of merges and creates something else, kind of remix. And part of the project is also the postcards that where I show the whole series, and you are free to take one or two if you like.
Hello, my name is Ditte Knus Tønnesen, and I'm the Danish artist in this group exhibition. My work is over here. I was very happy to be invited for this project, but also as I see myself as an artist, not a photographer, and I work with objects, sculpture, installation, but also photography, but maybe more in an expanded field often. The project here is dealing with both mine or our understanding of photography and nature. And I think it, well, as a Dane, and with the background in our very mild and controlled nature and landscape in Denmark, it made a big impression on me when I started to travel around in the Nordic countries. And I got curious in how we understand and relate to the nature today, and how we suddenly see, or how we can suddenly see a little park as like, yeah, back to nature, or back to the, yeah, what can you say, the beginning, or, well, but what I mean is that we don't that often think about how much man has been involved in it, or how planned it is. A little bit, as we heard earlier today in your project. So thematically, I have traveled around, visited what you call it, stone mines, overground, where man is changing the nature, bringing the material out to build roads and houses and so on, and then what we say. So in my work, I guess the material is always a big part of it as well, and these pieces are made in a traditional black and white darkroom with liquid emulsion. Yeah, I guess so. It's a lot about going out, but also going in, taking things apart to put them together again, to bring in maybe a room for abstraction, which I think can give a few seconds more before we kind of decide in our mind, oh, this is what I mean, before we read the code of the picture or place it in our archive, or recognize it in our archive. Yeah. Yeah, let's stop there.
I just have a few questions that we could discuss here, and then you can just add questions, because we've been doing this as an artist talk, the previous places where we showed the exhibition, and tried to keep it quite informal and open so people can ask questions. which is interesting also because we keep on, as you say, maybe you feel like you're saying the same things all over. Of course, it's a new audience, so we need to say it again. But I was thinking first, this, as we are discussing the Nordic, and this was a Nordic project, not on my behalf in order to show, oh, we're all the same, we have the same view of the landscape, and we are so alike, just as much to show how different we are, and just to work together because we're neighbors, and it's interesting to work together with other countries, and we're close to each other. And then, of course, also somehow searching, is there like similarities, and how do we look at the landscape or the nature? And of course, Didi, you didn't say that your landscape is, or nature is found in Sweden, and it's not like we're just taking our own landscape or surroundings and using it in or you're not, I'm saying mine like I'm an artist, I'm not, but you're not taking necessarily your closest surroundings or landscape and using it. But it is a Nordic project, and it is funded by Nordic funds, and it's part of this Nordic network. So does it make any sense to you, or does it mean anything to be in this Nordic collaboration, or is it like, is it a problem maybe to be like a Nordic artist, or what do you think?
Well, I just want to comment on that. It's not important for my project, for example, that where the first photographic material was captured. So in that sense, what can you say? Sometimes maybe the Nordic word or title just is a bit more cream on the cake in a way. I mean, this is how this exhibition is put together, I guess. I mean, sometimes that's how more maybe how it feels than, yeah.
I have a small comment on that one as well, because I think all of us here, we are kind of either walking in the streets or hiking or kind of doing something to get to our locations. And Johan has a more previous project where he's been hiking in Lofoten in horrible weather and kind of dealing a bit with what I try to deal with every day. And when I lived in New York, I was like, yeah, but I can do this here as well. Upstate has like great mountains, and let's get a bunch of people to assist me and go for a hike. And it didn't really work out that well. And I realized that something that we have in common that's not necessarily that visible in the work is our relationship with landscape or nature in different ways, because we tend to spend a lot of time outside, whether it's at daycare or Sunday hikes. I mean, I think we Norwegians are a bit extreme, but I think in general in the Nordic countries, we tend to at least dare to relate ourselves. And I think that's also something with the Nordic and the theme, that why shouldn't we care to communicate something through our surroundings as a scene? I mean, as a human being, one has the inner landscape, but one also has one's surroundings. And I think you cannot say that landscape photography is not that interesting anymore, because landscape is what surrounds us. And that will always be something. And it's, yeah, even though it's not necessarily from our own countries, or even though we go someplace else to photograph, maybe we will have that foundation of our, like, how we trod nature, and also all the problems, like, I had a very big problem about being a Norwegian in Greenland, because we are really kind of putting a grip on Greenland to get the resources. And it's different from traditional colonialism, because we don't want to get the people of Greenland to work for us, like with the tea production in India, or we want to get them away, like make their plane tickets east-west very inaccessible and expensive, so they would keep themselves away from the east, so that the other European countries can access and do oil service. So it's about the lack of control for the population, and also feeling that you in a way know things that you shouldn't do about the country, that the people that are living there are not so much aware of. It's really uncomfortable. So being Nordic is also a big challenge. And maybe if we do some future collaborations, maybe that's something that would be more part of the discussion. I don't know, yeah.
You know, I would agree with a little bit what they've been saying, that you know, of course, every country is different and has every, you know, kind of their own thing to it. But of course, maybe my country, Iceland, is farthest from here, like practically seen. And but also our common denominator is the culture and the way we think and how we approach each other. So the collaboration is not a difficult aspect of this group show compared to when I travel to and work with people coming from, let's say, Eastern Europe. Then it's different kinds of problems I have to deal with, and it's different way of thinking. So I think this is a very good thing about our collaboration, that it's been going very smoothly in that sense. And but to put forward that we are Nordic in that sense, and that should be like our beacon to go somewhere. I don't think that's the most important factor. Just that we can work very good together. And like you said, with the theme of the nature, after I did this series, I had recently started working with more like classical landscape art, and after I got invited to do this project with them, I focused more on that. And for me, also, like Tonja was mentioning, that it surrounds you, and especially in Iceland, it affects you every day, the weather and the nature, so you can't escape it no matter what you do. And of course, it's a big part of our art history and everything, but I found it the most difficult thing that I have tried in my art creation was for me to go to something which was so obvious and so close to me, and to try to tackle it was very difficult to find a way to use it in my art and in some kind of creative way. And in the beginning, I have no idea what I was doing or why I did it, but with this traveling of this exhibition and the talks and thoughts we've had, it has helped out develop this idea to work with nature in some way.
Well, I could say that much, that these images which I'm presenting here, maybe half of them are photographed in the Nordic countries, and half of them are in different parts of Europe or Japan, where I've been working in residencies. So for me, the geographical place isn't that important. Maybe the Nordic atmosphere or melancholy or something of to do with distance or this kind of feeling, that could be something that I can find like connecting us, but not the geographical, because it is something we are surrounded by as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of hard to talk about the Nordic, because I mean, in the case, I mean, it depends so much on who's making the selection. I mean, it could have a totally different outlook. And in the case of this show, I believe that all the projects were kind of individual projects that were put together to a show. But I'm just thinking that it would be interesting to in another time, another place, take the I'm missing the word. To collaborate in an earlier stage, kind of making a project together from start and see how we will get along and or whoever does it, how they will get along and what will come out of that. But it needs a lot more funding and so on to make that kind of project. But I'm still very happy to be in this context.
Okay, so just to maybe, not necessarily, but to try to finish the landscape discussion, because we discussed it yesterday while walking the city, that working with the landscape, I think somebody mentioned that it might be easy. But as you said, as more of you said, it's not easy because it's so full of history and ideas and cliches. And I mean, even myself, when I take a picture of a landscape, I have so many painters and photographers in my head. And going to Reykjavik after having seen your work, I was like, oh no, now I'm doing an Ingvar. This is like an Ingvar. I can't really take a picture of Reykjavik without thinking about you. And even though it's the same house, it's still like, so we have so many landscapes in our head and so many ideas. So I think it must be some of the most one of the most tricky motives to like dive into as an artist and figure out how do I do this in my way, with of course references to maybe all this history of landscape and nature, but how do I do it in my own way? So that's just my thinking of it. And then maybe we should discuss the thing about, I was suggesting that having an exhibition traveling like this makes an exhibition much more of a process than a result of your works, then I put it together, and because often we think about an exhibition more or less like the result of something. Then we choose the work, or we produce the work, and then this is it. But of course, people come to look at the exhibition, they have ideas, and maybe give some specific experience, and we do some communication, guided tours, and write something about it. But what about when we close the exhibition? What happens? And of course, this exhibition traveled to new places, looked in very different ways. This is the first time it's like in one room, not divided by walls or something else. So a lot of new stuff happens, and the works are in different, like, what do you call it? Yeah, some of the exhibitions started with Annie's works, and then it's Johan's works, and then it's in different order, and they meet each other in new ways, the works, and we have a lot of new discussions. So maybe it's interesting to discuss what does this do to you as an artist? Not necessarily that you know yet, because it's still like an ongoing process, and I know many of you have worked with similar projects before, but having a traveling exhibition going across countries and you coming along, and we're having all these discussions with people you meet at the shows and with me and the audience, what does it matter? Does it make sense and give you some new thoughts and ideas?
Well, I think it's been interesting how different the exhibition has been in different spaces, because I've been installing my works in all the 4 places, and this is maybe the first one where it's actually in one room and the works are kind of in dialogue to each other in a different way than before. And also in the other places, it's been always finding new thoughts within your own work, but also in the relation to the other works. And as I've been also changing the composition a bit and the works I've been exhibiting, it's been really different. And I wonder, I lost my thought, but
maybe what we talked about yesterday. Did you have something? No, but I can start. Because we talked about this, that if you play on either the color and beauty, like harmonic aspects of your photography, or like I do, playing on the romantic notions, we have quite a hard time doing that. I mean, of course you can choose to defend it, or you can just choose not to. And but I think traveling together like this, we sometimes can kind of develop a language, not like you say, not only about our own things, but in relation to the other works, and find kind of a common language to talk more general. For instance, I felt when I did my studies that especially during bachelor's, I was constantly, basically, they tried to stop me from doing what I do. And then when I did my master's, it was kind of already a project there that was exhibited in a museum and researched by the Norwegian Polar Institute, who actually believed in the story of my first character. And then all of a sudden they saw that there was a point, because my starting point was like, why do we need these books called The Female Polar Explorers? I mean, what does that actually give? What does that kind of say about female travelers, that their main signifier is that they are female? Or with Annie's pictures, that people always need to kind of divide them into, like, when did you do this picture? Like, people always kind of try to find a system within her big project. And if one wants to leave something behind, it can actually be like what we all do here can be very political in terms of reacting on something else, and to kind of find this common language and get input from the other ones. Like, I think my suitcase there was actually an input, like that thing happened because of some of the other artists here, and I was discussing with Ditte, like, why did I use a museum like display in Copenhagen? And I was like, yeah, I know, it's okay in this space. It was in the museum building, Banjarato. Kind of works there, but what should I do next? And then I came back home and I found this suitcase. And I think that it's quite it floats, like we've changed the selection and but also the way we talk about our projects. In the beginning, we couldn't have done this. It was mostly like 5 different projects, whereas now it's more about the exhibition, traveling, and discussing the notions, and in a way, not generalizing. That's very important, but trying to find aspects. Was it a question?
Shall we let the audience?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Hello. I just wanted, did you meet before the exhibition? Did you have a workshop before, or you just met at the opening, or?
Like first time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I met them all first time at the opening.
So there was no discussion before how you're going to present, or like?
I was in Greenland when the other people installed their works on a sailing boat. So I had to say hello to everyone at the opening.
Well, of course, there was discussion with Kerstin about which works to display, and then I didn't actually know any of the artists before, and that's been wonderful to get to know their works and the persons. But in general, about showing your work in exhibitions, I think it's not. It doesn't stop there, of course. It's just for a brief moment. There are like this, and then it continues. But it's a very essential part of the evolving your work is to exhibit it and show it, because then it keeps moving.
I also want to add. I mean, if you look at this touring exhibition in a very, what can you say, extremely contrasted black and white way, then in that sense, it's not that the exhibition has changed that much. I mean, it's 99% is the same works in it. Yeah, they are hung or installed different. So in that sense, I don't think that is the biggest part of the project or the tour. It's the rest, kind of. It's the new audience. It's the new places. It's the way we and our knowledge about each other's as artists and each other's work grows. And that has been the biggest thing. I mean, and also to meet the different audience and discover the small contrasts which are here within our lovely countries. In that sense, and I think that's where the really exciting stuff has happened, and which we have been so lucky to experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Like we found different discussions in different places, and I found that interesting to see that. Yeah, they were maybe thinking similar things, but the discussions went in different directions. And practical-wise, also, I think for me personally, it was interesting to follow these different images, how they were in the space, and the nickname for my picture far to the left, the white one, was the troublemaker, and it always caused me trouble in a lot of spaces. But like in here, it makes perfect sense. So it was always also strange to see how each photo works in a different way in a different setting. So it's that's been interesting.
Can I add just a tiny thing? I don't know if we told you, Johan, but we had these artist presentations in Bergen, my hometown, and Johan was not there. Like we said, one of us has been missing every place, and in Norway, his project became kind of this memo game. People started to guess, and of course ask me, like, where are all these pictures? Because it's done alongside, like in a triangle, like Bergen, Oslo, Trondheim, and both the traditional roads to Oslo, right? Both Hardangervidda and Aurlandshol. And I was like, oh, that's Vøringsfossen, and that's Aurlandsdal, and I don't know about that one. And people started, and because I think people in Norway kind of feel that they own that landscape a bit almost. So then there was not that much discussion about the black metal texts on top of the image, which had been like the major discussion. And actually some of the bands that have these texts, they have their like artist space or their studios in Bergen Kjøtt, the building where we exhibited. So some of them came not for the presentations because they're obviously like too shy to come join in for these presentations, but they came to kind of comment on which lines of their text that were used and in what way, and like this, I don't know, is that not here, the I evig fock, is that? No. It's not here, but they were like, why isn't there any fock on the like eternal frog image, like, you know, like these very concrete, cute questions, but all in all they were very pleased with representing their own. So I think that's also a thing that it changes. And also Ditte's work changed a lot in Bergen, like people started to talk about mining, whereas in Copenhagen people were seeing it as a romantic landscape, some of the viewers. And Ditte tried to say it's very man-made, but I was like, yeah, it's very man-made.
They didn't get it at all. They were like, no, it's stone. It must be wild. So that was fun to realize.
Yeah, I was very curious also about what the process of it, and of course I know that this was already done work, so to speak, that were put together by Kirstine, and then you, I mean, apart from getting to know each other and seeing the show in different spaces, what it actually meant for you. I mean, now you have touched upon it, all of you, in one way or another, because I think one of the points with seeing yourself in relation to other people or seeing your work in relation to other work is that you get to see yourself in a new way, that you really get the glance on yourself from sort of an outside thing that you might not get if you're not sort of related to it. And I guess you just said that, yes, that has happened.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I can say that I get to learn really how the work can in any way not be installed, in ways it's not working at all. And I get to practice how to communicate that when I can't be there to install it. So that's a good thing, I mean, so and very important. But because that means that I get into a, what you say, deeper relationship to the work and kind of understand it it needs to be like this, because else suddenly another discussion occurs. Yeah.
So it actually also emerges new methods and new ways to relate to it when you have to work on distance, as I have emailing with all of you or SMS when installing with different things.
Very much. Yeah, very much so.
I also think it's quite funny that both Ingvar and me were part of this New Nordic magazine, and there we were actually put in 2 different chapters, just so you know it. And none of them were landscape. And so I think also that it is actually very, perhaps it seems there's something about the color and the melancholic perspective that's perhaps very similar, but the projects are very different. And
But that's almost also more questions related to, I mean, our lovely curator kind of. I mean, because we as artists, we had nothing to do with that. We were just like, got an email or got the invitation and then, hey, okay, this is the deal. Take it or leave it, you know.
I'm the boss. No,
in that sense.
Back also to your question about the workshop, it could have been really interesting to do like workshops in the beginning, and we also discussed doing much more than just artist talks when we were traveling with the show, and of course you could do so many activities that could extend this way of working, and in a way it is a quite classical way of working. I invited 5 artists and asked, would you show that project or that project, and Ditte made a new project, and some of the other artists showed something that they had done before. And I mean, there are many ways to do these things, and this was just one way, quite a classical way. And also the traveling exhibition is not like a big experiment. I mean, many people, museums and institutions do that, but the idea of, for me to look at the same works in different ways, in different places, meeting new people, discussing them in different ways, is really interesting. Also because often if you have like an artist talk, if I presented this show to you just the way you did now, talked about your works, it's very short and you don't hear that much. Hopefully you will look at the works, experience them and get your own ideas and your own thoughts, but the thing about keep talking about these things and getting deeper into them and having different views on it is really interesting, I think, because often you go to an exhibition maybe once And maybe you go back because it's so extremely good you have to see it again. But often it is like just one time you experience it. And like Annie's works, I think also I think it's really interesting how you work as an artist. If you work with a project, one work, you finish it, or does it continue? And the way you work, you keep on continuing this big project of yours, and you can add older works and bring in new works, and they make new stories, and they are something in themselves, but together they make new stories. And there are so many layers in them. Of course, there are many layers in all of your works, but I think I'm getting to know all of these works, and I've done exhibitions earlier where I actually got a bit tired of the works in the end, but I haven't done it with this exhibition, and I think maybe it's because it keeps on growing and adding new things to each other, and they talk. It's like the works, they go into dialogue with each other and with the colors and with the motifs and the themes. So I think as a curator, it's really interesting to work with a traveling show where whether you bring in new works or not, it's always a new place and it's a new setting. And I think it's giving, and I would love to have had more time and more resources to dive more into the communication and write more about it and do more activities and stuff like that. But, money and time and different things makes it difficult to do more of that. But it's really interesting for me to work in that way. And also bringing 5 artists together, I think making a group exhibition is horribly difficult. I think finding a way to make it work, to make these different projects go into some kind of dialogue, but not be too similar and not fight each other, and it's really difficult. Also, the whole installation part is quite tricky. So, for now on, I'm only going to do solo exhibitions with each of these 5. Yeah. I don't know if that was...
I just wanted to say it's the first time I'm part of a traveling exhibition, and it's interesting to see how like my perspective changes from like the first exhibition, really huge individual concern regarding how I want to present my images, and then you get to know each other, and it slowly more and more becomes kind of a collective concern, more thinking about the final presentation of the whole exhibition than my works. So yeah, it's a good experience.
Just one more comment.
Sure.
I also think that the personal thing, of course, this is like professional and it's business and we're working. I'm paying them a small fee sometimes and taking care of the transportation, and it's part of your career and blah, blah, blah. But this is also about getting to know some people. I mean, we've had so many great discussions. We have gotten drunk together and had fun, and I don't think we've had a big fight yet, so maybe it's a good thing to stop it now. But the thing about meeting people, and we are getting to know each other, and I'm getting to know you as human beings as well, because a lot of, in our world, it's also meeting new people all the time and short-term projects. And so this thing about Nordic collaboration that continues also in our network is great, because we get to know each other as well and know how we work, and it's much more easy to work when you know each other and you have a feeling, who am I working with? I'm working with Gunilla, and I have an idea of who you are, and it makes it so much easier to collaborate with you than if I never met you. And so,
are we ending or no? I just wanted to add kind of a thing to what can you say when people are doing the next kind of tour, or so I was thinking, or I have been thinking about, because of course there is also a lot of practical stuff continuing when you are touring, and in that sense I just think it's very important to remember to kind of play very open. What can you expect, like contract-wise, fee-wise, money-wise, insurance-wise, deadlines. But because I think, I don't know if the big institutions here today already work like that, but it had made me think more of to kind of borrow the mindset from, for example, when when musicians are touring, that it's really good and extremely important that Christine has been the key holder for the whole process, so we could contact her, and then she could say, no, you have to speak with that person, or so on. But also that if we have been even more clever, we could have from the beginning already have planned so much more, so it wouldn't have been so stressful along the way, or in the times where it was. I mean, also really collecting that all the press material in the beginning, and then it was just so we didn't everywhere need to send all the pictures again, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that, at least for me, is a good kind of visual picture to remember. Okay, so how is it to be touring in this bus? Like, what can we reuse? I mean, why didn't we make one poster? We could use all 5 spaces. Why was it printed 5 times, for example? Stuff like that. Yeah.
So you have learned a lot. And to wrap it up with the question that is actually posted in the program. What is to gain from a show like this? The answer must be just a lot. Yeah? Okay? No? Well, someone wants us to stop here, it seems. Thank you so much, all of you.